Welcome to the Women in Voice Summit. This is a 3-day event where people from all over the world get to meet, interact, and network about all things voice. This is a real opportunity to build meaningful relationships while you're here. That's what Women in Voice is really about. Community. We encourage you to not only absorb the amazing content from speakers and workshop, but also interact with people on social media and in the Q&A Zoom rooms. If we were in person, you might talk to the person sitting next to you. We recommend you be social here also. You ready? Let's join the conversation.
We're at work and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from all around the world. If you want to put where you are coming in from, you can rename yourself, add your pronouns to your participant thing. I'll say, and mine is in the waiting room. Everyone in the meeting. Greetings from sunny Seattle. I'm thrilled to say that it is balmy 60s. It's going to maybe get into the 70s. Who knows? But our summer here. If you want to put where you're calling in from, got LA, Spain. Very cool.
Ooh. One thing is I can't see the chat while I am sharing, so.
Okay, well, there are lots of people saying, I'm reading them out.
Yes,
I'm your moderator, Lisa, so
yes,
ask me whatever you need.
Thanks,
everything you need. Absolutely. We got people from
What's
the
happening?
UK,
What's happening?
From Canada. There are tons of people joining from the weight room, Chicago. All right, so this is our little buffer time we got as people join. In theory, we'd have music. If we're in person, we'd be all checking out Lisa on the stage. Maybe one day soon or not.
Drinking our coffee.
Right.
Oh my God, I miss the days of in-person conferences so much.
Oh,
so much.
I've been having so many flashbacks of like we've been having sub meetups and people like find a table to go talk to other people, because you remember when we used to do that. And anyway, Vancouver. Yeah, we've had some amazing meetups earlier. Love the virtual. Thank you, Dara. Great, crazy grad school schedule. We've been hearing a lot of desire for hybrid for the future.
Yes,
so
I think that's where things are going, because not everyone's going to be able to travel and not everyone's going to feel comfortable.
That's right. Well, just
kind
people
of
from Croatia, literally people who like, I don't think that they'd access our stuff otherwise. So it's hard to not want them in the future. Exactly. Cool. Well, we got a lot of topics to go over today, and we're going to hear our phenomenal keynote, our closing keynote from Lisa. But I just have a little notes for everybody here. So let me just read them off. Welcome everybody to the closing keynote. This is our first ever Women in Voice Summit. It's pretty amazing. We hope you had an incredible time learning and connecting this week. We're almost done. We still got a few things later today. Today we've got the advantage of also doing a live QA with Lisa. So please take advantage of interacting with her and asking her questions that we'll get to at the end here. We're so excited for Lisa to join the stage. I miss seeing her in person and really getting some deep insights into her career. But first, before we do that, I'm here with Laura Leeper from Alexa Education, who is, the Alexa team is also WIV's second platinum sponsor. Laura, thank you for your outstanding support of Women in Voice. We deeply appreciate it. And congrats to your team for Alexa Live yesterday, blew up.
Thank you. We'll take it. Yeah, it was great. We had an amazing day yesterday. I don't know if any of you saw some of the articles that came out, but we've had really good coverage. We actually announced 50 new features, which is pretty exciting. And I think everyone is just trying to digest all of the changes and figure out how it will impact them and their business, which is exactly where everybody should be right now. And I'm actually gonna put a link in the chat window now so that you have access to our blog. That's probably the best place to go. A lot of that content we are processing, getting the videos ready, and we'll get them up on our Alexa developer website. But for now, that blog is a good place to go. And then I'm also putting in a note for the Alexa Slack community. So the community is alive and well. We've got right now over 1,100 participants and members in that group, and asking, any questions that can someone tell me you know, as I'm developing, what am I doing wrong here? Because I get stuck, or you know, just want to test a new feature. So Dara, all you need to do is just click on that link, and then it'll automatically give you an invitation. So it's the alexa.design/Slack. Nice and easy, and you are in. So I would love to get more of you into that group, talking, joining. You know, Joan is one of our Alexa champions. And that means, you know, it probably comes as no surprise to anybody on this call. She's just been an amazing resource for the Alexa community at large, certainly for women. And those are things that we're really committed to as Amazon. And we've also got Ted on from our Amazon team. He's going to talk at the tail end after Lisa wraps up. But got a lot of ideas for you designers out there. Just encourage you to take a look, hear what Lisa has to say. She's definitely a veteran in this industry. Got some great insights. And Joan and Maddie, thank you for organizing this event. It's been a real pleasure, and to see the number of people who've come out shows the commitment that is there from women in voice. It's not just for men, and I think that feels really good for all of us. So thank you again. Let me know if you have any questions. I've actually got to jam a little bit early, so forgive me. I'm headed to a tech talk. Lots of things going on after Alexa Live, but ping me if you need anything. Happy to answer questions for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Well, and 50 new features. Gosh.
Yeah, not bad,
so
right?
many, not bad at all, and so many exciting things to dive into. So people, please feel free to join that Slack. And thank you, Laura. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Lisa, I'm gonna read your bio and give your intro. I'm so excited. It's deeply impressive. All right. So our closing keynote today, Lisa Falkson is a senior VUI designer at Amazon Alexa, leading a team of VUI designers covering Alexa communication, Fire TV, and new multimodal devices. She's the editor and author of Ubiquitous Voice, Essays from the Field, and has over 15 years of experience of industry and research experience, specializing in the design, development, and deployment of natural speech and multimodal interfaces. Her most recent work includes next generation voice user interfaces at Neo and Cloudcard, as well as Amazon's first speech-enabled products, Fire TV, Fire Phone, and Echo Alexa. Prior to that, she focused on early iPad, iPhone interfaces at Volio and speech-enabled IVR applications at Nuance. Lisa holds a BSEE from Stanford and an MSEE from UCLA. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Joan. And thanks, Laura, for that intro. I love being called a veteran because you know what that really means. It means old. So, and also, you know, I got to update my bio because I think I'm over 20 years now. And that just sounds way more impressive than 15, right? Like over 15 versus 20. All right. So can you guys see my screen okay? I'm going to make sure this advances as well.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Let's see. How do I spotlighted my video, but now I can't advance slides.
Uh-oh.
Problem.
All right. Do you want me to just push you back to pin? Would that be better?
Hold on one second.
Sure thing.
There we go. Now it's working. Can you guys see?
Right. I can't actually see it.
Okay. Let's go back to show.
They're beautiful slides. We got to make sure to see them.
Oh, thank you. I know they are. Yeah, we tested the slides, but we didn't test the
I know.
So
beauty
now
of the spotlight
there, but it's not in presentation mode. So let's see. Here we go. Okay.
Awesome.
All right, you guys. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited about this Women in Voice Inaugural Summit. As Joan knows, I've been involved various ways in Women in Voice from the beginning. It's just wonderful to see how many folks are attending, and also it being timed with Alexa Live and us sort of supporting each other, even though our conference is sometimes overlapping. I think it's amazing. So thanks, Joan, and thanks, Maddie, for inviting me to speak. So today I'm going to talk about my career journey. And this is one of the top things I get asked is, how did you end up where you are? how did a person with a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering end up being a designer, a vui designer? And so I'm going to talk through my career journey, and I will sort of give a lot of details, but my goal is not to bore you to death with my resume, because you can just read that on LinkedIn. My goal is really to talk about the different things I learned and all these different twists and turns that I took in my journey. So the inspiration for this talk, and I'm going to mute my Alexa because I just realized it's right here, and I'm going to say Alexa a lot. So that would be a rookie move. Is inspiration for this is actually a old SNL skit, which I don't know if any of you guys will be old enough to know this one, but it was called "What's the Best Way?" And my husband and I had watched this skit, and he is from New England, and it's basically just a hilarious skit where a bunch of people with New England accents give like directions, you know, from Taunton to Plymouth, and talk about how many Dunkin Donuts there are on the way for like bonus points. So, but one of the funny things is every once in a while someone gets asked, they ask for directions and they say hilariously, "You can't get there from here," which I always thought was really funny, because obviously there's got to be a way to get there, right? So let's see if this audio works. Maybe not.
You can't get there from here.
So that is a recording of my husband, who is born and raised in South Shore, Massachusetts. And that's how it would sound if you can't get there from here. So I felt really insecure about the way I was saying it. So I had him record it. So here's kind of why I came up with this analogy and really wanted to talk about it, like in this metaphor of driving directions. One of the reasons is the thing is, you ask one person how they get somewhere, and you're going to get different directions from every person, because there's so many different ways of reaching the same destination, right? Someone who might be a vui design manager, very similar job to what I have right now, may have taken a very different path. And so everyone's going to give you different advice. And, you know, each journey is unique. Mine has its own special twists and turns, and luck plays a factor, right? So, you know, there's days where you're driving and you hit every green light and it's just like, yes, the universe is with me. And then there are days where you hit every red light. So we've certainly had both of those in our career, pretty much everyone. All right, so I'm going to start with grad school, and this is sort of the parking lot, right? I'm sitting and I'm preparing for my drive. This brings up some of the luck, though. When I left Stanford, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my double E degree. And I kind of declared late. I was a very angst-filled undergrad, and tried a bunch of different majors, starting in physics. And I just really crammed that in, and I wanted to go to grad school to learn more about electrical engineering. So I just by luck ended up at UCLA. I was looking at a ton of schools across the country, but I wanted to stay in California. And I was admitted to the speech and auditory perception laboratory there. And my advisor was actually the only, at the time, female double E professor. And so that was one of the things that drew me there. And that's where I learned kind of the basics of speech recognition, text to speech, wrote a paper about that. I did research in a totally different area, which I didn't love. But one thing I realized is that I really wanted to go applied. So I wasn't very interested in continuing doing PhD. But what I did learn was that I had this passion for speech recognition and the technology. So this kind of kickstarted my interest. And it also gave me my first really strong female role model in tech. And that was my advisor. Her name is Abir Alwan. She and I are still close. She then became the first tenured female double E professor at UCLA, came out of the MIT Media Lab, a lot of famous speech folks. And I think that was really important because she has sort of advised me through my career and continues to be a great role model for me. So my first job, I have to tell you, I couldn't find a job doing anything that I wanted at all. And now we live in this great world where there's Alexa and Siri and Google Assistant, tons of speech recognition work. But at the time, there weren't a lot of companies doing it. There were just a few startups, and I didn't know about them. So I just kind of took the first job that I could get. And you guys maybe have not even heard of Sun Microsystems because it's this company that doesn't exist anymore. And I was what's called a product engineer. I did testing. Here's a board for a Sun server. And I was hired because I was good with the circuit modeling software. And I kind of managed suppliers and tested these memory chips. And really, it was terribly boring, to be honest. So here's what I learned there. And though I will point out is that even the worst jobs or the least, the most ill-fitting jobs for me that I've had in my career have taught me something really terrific. So what I learned is hardware is not for me. My husband actually works in hardware and I have a lot of friends in hardware, and it's a different world, and it was not a good fit for me in terms of like what I wanted to do. But I did learn a lot about project management, which I've used many, many times throughout my career. All the trade-offs between time, resources, and scope. And that was a really, really terrific experience to learn so early in my career how to manage a product or manage a project in all its different phases. Unfortunately, and I don't want to go into a ton of detail, it was, 1998, so many years ago, and there were, just inappropriate workplace behavior was sort of rampant, I think the 80s and 90s. One of the things that I love about encountering so many of the young women that I do today in the workforce is that they just would not put up with any of this stuff that we had to put up with in the 90s. And I'm really, really proud of kind of how far we've come in terms of standing up for ourselves. So unfortunately that I had that experience, but it kind of, makes you stronger in the long run. And also learn a little bit how to avoid certain situations in the future. So then I was stalled there, but then I kind of jumped like right on the freeway. And these 7 years, that nuance are really when I kind of became the designer that I am today. So I started as what's called a speech technology specialist. And that's because I came in from the engineering side. And what you did as a speech technology specialist was you tuned grammars, basically, because the engines did not used to be able to understand everything you could say. They had very, very fixed things that you had to hand code. And so I was tweaking those grammars and I was messing with speech recognition parameters. I also spent some time in pre-sales. They took folks who were good at speaking in front of customers, and they brought them out with the sales team to talk about like real solutions instead of just selling software. But the most fun I had was when I went back into what we called professional services, and I did end-to-end. And that's when I really started doing requirements, design, development, and launch. And this is what I learned. And I'll tell you, this is a very, very specific moment that I realized that I wanted to be a designer. And we don't have the speech technology specialist job really anymore. There's NLU engineering, but so you guys probably won't, again, have the same exact journey, but I looked at a lot of data, and hopefully you're able to look at a lot of data in your job as well to really see how people are interacting with your system. But I looked at a ton of data and I saw a lot of confused customers saying some weird things to the systems. And I realized, well, I can keep changing the grammars and I can tweak these recognition parameters, but what's really going on in the system? Like, why is it not working? And what I could do is always trace it back to the design. So maybe the question was being asked in a confusing way, or maybe it was asked in the wrong order, or maybe the whole flow of the conversation was wrong. And that's why people were confused. And that's when I realized that what I really wanted to do was design these conversations instead of being on the back end trying to fix them after the system was already written. So so that's how I became what we called then at Nuance, a dialogue designer. And I was so lucky to have so many brilliant coworkers that many of them had linguistics backgrounds, and they were really natural with the dialogue design role. And so I learned a lot from there. So really at Nuance, in my 7 years at Nuance, is how I learned to become a designer and the importance of design through listening to customer data. But I also learned it as sort of a bonus thing by my time in sales, how to understand and calculate ROI and understand the business importance. And this is really important, especially in the IVR world, like Nuance, which did, Charles Schwab and United Airlines and all those, where people are dialing in, want to speak to a person, they get a speech recognition application instead. But how does that save the business money? And that ended up being important a couple other times in my career. So that is Nuance. Let's see why. It's interesting when people are entering the waiting room and there's that's when I can't advance my slides. Interesting. Right. Hold on.
You're just too popular, Lisa.
That is a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about time off, and I think this is a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm calling it a rest stop, and I think a lot of people, and particularly women, who fight so hard to be taken seriously in industry, get really afraid of taking time off. For me, I had a bunch of different factors. My mother and my father-in-law were both sick with cancer. I was looking at starting a family and started fertility treatment, IVF, and at the time was working, 70, 80-hour weeks, and it was really impossible to juggle those things. So I stopped working, and this was really, really hard for me to do. Someone who had been killing themselves to go to top schools and prioritizing my career my whole life. And I remember actually financially, it was scary too. My husband and I sat down, with highlighters and different colored pens and looked at all our bills and his paycheck to see if we could live this way. But I didn't. So I ended up taking over 3 years off. And this is the awe moment. You can unmute if you want to awe. That's one of the cutest pictures ever of my son. I did have a really tough time actually. And that's a whole nother story if you want to hear how you can fail many times at IVF and then a bottle of tequila at a holiday party might get you the baby. I really enjoyed my time off, and luckily both my mom and stepfather recovered and were in remission for a long time. And I can say this with this 2020 hindsight, having had a fairly easy transition back to work, that it's okay to do it. And I think the main thing is to, before you go, don't burn any bridges. I had really, really strong professional relationships before I left industry for several years. People remembered who I was when I applied to come back for jobs. And that was important. And then for me, it was also important to return part-time and then slowly go back to full-time. I did go back to working at a startup that I'm about to talk about. And startups can be crazy. So even part-time at a startup can be difficult. But I think it's really important to ease your way back in, unless you're one of those people, which I am borderline, but I do know those people who part-time means full-time. So you might as well go full-time and actually get paid full-time. So that's, I see Joan nodding. I think Joan is one of these people. I don't think you're all in, right? So anyway, and then bonus picture of my son. I had an amazing time being a stay-at-home mom. He's almost 13 now, hard to believe, but yeah, I think it was actually great for me, and it kind of put me on solid footing to move on to this next phase. which I don't know why advancing works sometimes and
I
doesn't
think
work
if you
sometimes.
click on your slide one more time after.
There we go. All right.
There.
Oh, Maddie, what would I do without Maddie? Okay, so this is my sort of drive around the neighborhood, getting back on track with my career. So I joined a startup named Volio, which was founded by the original CEO of Nuance. So again, this was a personal sort of connection based on my previous work. And gosh, we had a lot of fun. We created an iPad app that had video of people and speech recognition. And the people looked like you were sort of chatting with them. And it was a choose your own adventure type of interaction. You take different paths and get, different advice or different stories. We did a great launch with Esquire. That was our biggest launch. And fashion, grooming, and mixology meaning booze. And I'm sure you know which was the most popular of those three. There was a great mixologist, David Wondrich, who would walk you through mixing different cocktails. And my husband always said if we could get the cocktail, off the iPad into people's hands, that would have been the way to get the startup funded for sure. But touch back up for voice input. This is my first experience with multimodality. It was also my first experience with doing something that was about entertainment versus customer care. So people were choosing to interact with us for fun versus being forced to speak to speech recognition because they called and wanted a person. All right. So what I learned about from working at Volio, and there's a ton more, but as kind of a quick summary, is small startup life. I think it's not for everyone. It was not great for me. It's very intense, and I also, of course, was coming back. I had a small child, a lot going on. But in a small startup, also the team dynamic is really important. And so one thing changes in the team and that can really throw you off. So the transition from 5 to 15 people, sometimes that's a really tough one. I learned how to design for multimodals with my first experience, like touch screens and voice. And it was, very, very different from designing for a phone-in application. And then one of my friends there, Mark Anixt, who was one of the founders of the startup, just kept reminding me, because I would tend to have these sprints and and he kept reminding me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And now one thing I will say, my understanding of business and ROI came in here. I was just analyzing over and over, is this startup necessarily going to make money? Is there a business case? I didn't see one. So you'll see the next place I jumped to was Amazon. And less than 6 months after I left the startup, they ran out of money and closed the doors instantly. So yeah, I did have sort of a good business sense there. So the next thing I did was Amazon, and Amazon is like the expressway of jobs. This was crazy town, 2014. So it was really funny. A bunch of my friends from Nuance, well, not a bunch, but 4 of my friends from Nuance had been at Amazon. We had no idea what they were working on. Turns out it was Echo. But when I joined Amazon, I remember someone posting when I changed my job on LinkedIn, that now we know Amazon is really focusing and doing something on speech, because that's all I did, right? They hired me. They're like, this is, we're focused. We're hiring someone who's a specialist. So at Amazon, my first stint at Amazon, I will say, was fairly short. It was only about 1.5 years. But in that time, I did redesign for all their first speech launches. So the very first speech launch was actually Fire TV. It was not the Echo. And that was just a voice search and some on-screen interaction. And the next thing was a Fire phone, and I spent an awful lot of time on the Fire phone. And one of the most spectacular failures in tech history, and also very near and dear to my heart because I spent a lot of time. But later in my career, I met the movie designer for the Windows phone, and we had a good laugh together that we both had designed the best voice assistants for the worst phones of all time. And then but the Fire phone actually did great things in terms of learning, and a lot of that learning was channeled and funneled into Alexa, which was launched later that year. So I only spent about maybe 10 to 20% of my time on Alexa. There was a 4-person team that was completely devoted to design of Alexa, but I did support them. All right, so one of the things I learned, and this is Amazon round 1, I'm currently in Amazon round 2, where I have learned even more. But talking about what I learned there, I had the best time partnering with engineering product. And for those of you who maybe are early in your career, one of the most important things I can tell you is that the partnership between design, product, and engineering, if you think of it as like a 3-legged stool, right? You really have to be strong. And if one of those legs is short, you're going to be all balanced. So I would say this was my first example where I just felt really, really close and in sync with my engineering and product partners. We met all the time. I had one product leader, one engineering manager, and the 3 of us were really sort of laid the foundation for the Fire phone voice assistant, which by itself, the phone notwithstanding, the voice assistant itself was actually fairly successful. I learned a lot more about voice and touch because it was a multimodal experience on the phone. And then also Fire TV, there was some voice input and remote. And then I think the thing that was newest for me, because at this point, multimodal wasn't completely new, and designing for entertainment versus customer care wasn't completely new, but I think designing for brand new devices, and that's a very different world, to have a completely new device form factor, and Echo being the most different of them all, being a voice first, and this just basically the creation of the smart speaker category. And it's hard. You have hardware and software changing at the same time. You have constant iterations. I remember the very early versions of the Echo having wake word issues that were beautifully resolved later on. So but that's going to impact your design process, and you're constantly going to be changing and evolving as the product evolves. So I thought that was really interesting and different about working on new devices. All right, so then I took a detour, and it's kind of mean to call it a detour, but I spent 2.5 to 3 years on car startups. And I will tell you, I think my heart was 100% in the right place in going this route. And I'm glad I did it. But it was kind of off of the track, I would say, of the trajectory of what I'd been doing at Amazon. And so at Cloudcard, I did this great Go Talk Play. And that was actually a really terrific interaction, very simple, beautiful, worked very closely with my UX designers on that. But the next job, so the frustrations I had at Cloudcard were like, no one's prioritizing the voice interface, and like it's just an add-on, right? Because we're more of a supplier. I was like, if we integrated the voice assistant from the very beginning and it was foundational to the vehicle, that would make the difference. So I joined a car company. I joined it was a Chinese electric vehicle company, and that's the first car that they launched. And that unfortunately didn't pan out that well because they actually have still not launched a US car, and I don't speak Chinese, so that didn't work out very well for me in terms of designing their system. But here's what I learned about working at car startups, and I will say this. So I am not a car person. Car people are very specific people, and they work at car companies, and they talk about cars all the time. And on their weekends, they race cars and they repair cars, and all they want to talk about is cars, and all they care about is cars. And I'm not that person. The other thing I learned is that culture, and in both places I saw issues around culture, and I think that those impacted the success. Cloudcard no longer exists. Neo still exists, but it is sort of changed and refocused and has been more successful since it did that. The other thing I learned, and I would say this is a really important one, is not to stick around in a toxic management situation. And I did have a manager at one of these companies that, he had inherited me. I'd been hired directly by the CEO. And he, as the design VP, wanted to hire his own team, didn't. And just, me being me, I was like, how could anyone not like me and want me on their team? And I'm so nice and I can get along with anyone. And I tried too long and too hard to push a relationship that was doomed to fail. And I think if I had it to do over again, one of my friends there he was like, wait a minute, this is not going well, you need to get out. And that was like 2 months in. And I wish I'd sort of started my search and started thinking about moving on earlier, because I really subjected myself to a lot of kind of bullying and toxic behavior that I shouldn't have. And so that is sort of a learning that I would say, is that when you're not in a good situation, get out of it very quickly. Don't hang around and just keep trying. I think as women, sometimes we're pleasers, right? And we want we want to fix things, and sometimes it's really better to move on. So here I am now, and this is sort of that will be towards the end of my chat on Amazon Take 2, or I call it like my second tour, which sounds like the military. So some people don't like that, but this is the Autobahn, right? So if you guys don't know the Autobahn has it might have a speed limit, but I don't think anyone listens to the speed limit, and the speed limit's like 200 miles an hour. So in Take 2, I spent my first year and a half, so I'm about at year 3. I spent my first year and a half in Alexa communication. I was wooed back to Amazon by some very close friends, and this is another reason I say always keep your work relationships solid, right? And don't burn bridges, because these were people that I'd worked with at Amazon before and at other companies. And I was a little hesitant to go back to a company that I already left. I'd never done that. And they convinced me that the team was amazing. And once I met the team, I just was blown away. And it was a great fit. So I was really passionate about communication as a domain. The top domains in the car were communication, music, and navigation. I didn't want anything to do with navigation anymore. So I looked at music and communication. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for great, life-saving things, like you read these stories about people who have an elderly relative and they don't hear from them, they can't reach them, and they drop in on their home, and they've fallen, and then they call emergency services. Or a woman who fell, she said it was actually, she said, my Apple Watch didn't work, it couldn't pair with my phone, and I never used Alexa for communication, and I shouted out, Alexa, call so-and-so, to call her daughter. And it worked, and she was able to, for her daughter to send help when she had a broken hip. So I felt really passionate about Alexa communication. I still do. But what I noticed in my larger design org is that there was more of a need for broader VUI coverage. And so in a very typical Amazon way, I don't know how much you guys know about Amazon, but we write a lot of documents. We're very serious about our documents. And I wrote a 3-pager with my director and my manager, and I presented it to my VP. And in about an hour, I suddenly had a new team and a new role. It was pretty amazing. And that's when I transitioned from individual contributor to manager, and have hired and onboarded almost my entire team. So 3 of 4 folks, thanks to people like Ted, during the pandemic, which was just crazy to be able to do that. But now I have a team of 4. And we do cover Alexa communication still, so I still have hand in that. But as Joan said in my intro, we're covering Fire TV, we're covering new multimodal devices. So the Echo Show 10 that rotates and so that you can stay on screen was our design as well, and some other upcoming devices. So to talk about a little bit about, like, as I come to close, not of my career, hopefully, but of these 20 years, I think it's really, sort of timely that we are here with at the same time as Alexa Live. And I was looking at some of the themes from Alexa Live and those talks there. And a lot of these things really illustrate how different GUI design is. So as I said, it was, between 2000 and 2007, for 7 years, that I learned how to become a designer. It was a very, very different world then. And where we are now, right? So the biggest thing is that people are choosing to buy these devices. They're choosing to speak to Alexa. They're enjoying it, loving it. They're choosing it actively over other modalities, such as their phone, such as setting a timer on the microwave, et cetera. There's so many different ways that Alexa is better, or Google Assistant or anything better than the existing devices. But these smart speakers started as in-home devices, and mobile phone, the mobile space was already well served. Now Alexa and these assistants have become ubiquitous. So you, for example, can have your Echo Buds, you can have your Echo Auto, or Alexa might be integrated to your car. The other thing is that we've added this screen, and the multimodal design is so much more challenging, but has so many great advantages. And so I think these are some of the major changes over just the 6 or 7 years since Alexa launched. Connected vehicles, really important, right? As much as I'm not a car person, I still think voice in the car is so important, because we're not supposed to be looking at screens. We're not supposed to be looking at our phones. Phones are immersive, right? And we're better off just talking to an assistant. I think we're learning a lot about, so send to phone is something that my team worked on, a lot about transitioning from one device to another. That's something that wasn't a thing before, right? Maybe you're getting some information via the voice assistant on your smart speaker, but you want more detail and you want to bookmark it, save it for later, or open an app. There's a transition that happens there. The other thing, which I think is amazing, is learning and adaptation. And this is something I think that's was spoken about in Alexa Live. Imagine, you ask about your sports team score and your team lost, and you're terribly sad about it, and Alexa, chirps about it in the really perky way. Wouldn't it be great if she was like, a little bit like more sad about it for you? We have the capability now in TTS to have speaking adaptation in terms of excitement level. So that's a different kind of learning. There's also learning about like you as a customer and what your wants and needs and preferences are. So these are a lot of things that have kind of changed just in the past few years with Alexa. Okay. And here's what I'm learning in this process. It's great to be a boomerang. I wrote a Medium article, it's like the only Medium article I ever wrote. And I'm now scared to write another one because it's like, I got so much good feedback. It's like doomed to fail. Can't write another one as good. But if you look on Medium at this article, it's great to go back to a company that you know. You keep encountering things that are familiar, but at the same time, the fun part about it is you can be like, especially for 6 months, you're like, oh, I'm new. I don't know that. So you can like claim you're new. So you're a newbie, but then you can also be like, oh, I'm an old veteran at this. It's just like the perfect position to be in. What I'm also learning is that, you know, being a manager and the relationship with my team is as important as the work itself. And that's kind of what keeps me happy is in my second tour at Amazon, I have had two managers, Blair and Jackie, that are just two of the greatest human beings I've known. And that really, and now the team that I manage is amazing. And that's what keeps me happy. As much, I love the product and I love Amazon as a company, but it's really the people that are even, you know, in a crazy pandemic where we don't see each other, are making my job really fun. And then I'm also learning how to be a design manager. And it's very different from being an IC, learning how to not focus so much on the nitpicky details of the design that I'm making, but more on the big picture. And that's been hard, but productive. So in conclusion, and I know I'm running over time, I do want to say, you know, you've seen all these stalls and these twists and turns. And I would say, you know, even the ones that were not the best jobs, I really learned a ton. And I made great connections. I don't think I emphasized that enough. I have friends from those roles. Actually, when I posted about being the finalist for this Women Voice Award, like people from Neo, even though that was a really tough job, came piping, oh, I'm so excited for, you know, I made these amazing connections. And so these are kind of my key takeaways. Don't be afraid to take time away, take care of yourself first, you know, that marathon sprint thing. No, there's no reason to pull an all-nighter outside of college. People, like I did it in my 30s and 40s, and it's just a terrible, terrible idea. Don't do it. And lean into what you love. So it's a, you know, really find the thing that you love and pursue it. All right. And so that's it. Join us on Slack. This is the Slack channel that Laura already sent. And of course you can follow me on Twitter. I don't have my LinkedIn here, but you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and just take questions. And you guys can see my beautiful kitchen in the background. This is where the magic happens. I bake a lot of cookies here.
Awesome. That was fantastic, Lisa. I applaud you in person. What a beautiful talk and so thorough and so much introspection as you make. I love the metaphor of the driving. It's a really beautiful one. Well, and you did go a tiny bit over time. I know. It was such phenomenal content. I couldn't stop you. But folks, if you do have questions in the chat, we do have a tiny bit of time and you can follow up with Lisa and her team afterwards. Obviously, I've got a question that'll tie into Ted's stuff, kind of about as you talk through these insights. A lot of people here are thinking about the pivot, are thinking about whether they love their team, they love their projects. What are some of your, for those people, what are some actionable insights of next steps that you'd recommend to them to take in their careers?
Yeah, well, one is if you're really interested in food design, Ted is here to talk to you. Ted, do you want to just introduce yourself and say hi?
Yeah, sure, happy to. And you know, thanks for having me today. Excited to be part of this, everybody. I've been at Amazon about 4.5 years, and I'm a design recruiter. I work really closely with Lisa, and helped. You know, I help hire voice designers here and her team and elsewhere at Amazon. I'm on a design recruiting team in our devices business, and my particular world is voice. I'm the SME for voice design hiring here. As for some actionable insights, be intentional about where you want to move and what your goals are. I would say for the job hunt, keep your work up to date on your portfolio if you have one. If you have it behind a password, put that on your resume, because there will be things that you find, but there's a lot going on out there. There are roles that open up quickly. And if a recruiter or a hiring manager or a team can see your work and say, oh, wow, like this project that she did here is the perfect match for this thing that we want to do that we can't even put in our job description. It helps. It does help opportunity kind of come along when people can see your work and kind of draw those parallels there. If you see a job description, if you're actively looking for something and trying to think about that next step, break it
Ted,
down.
are there any roles you're looking for in particular today? Or I don't know if you can share, but if people are on the job hunt, do you have or a website to look at, specific roles that you think, you know, GUI designers here or devs or whatnot might be interested?
Yeah, so we have interesting stuff come up all the time. Amazon.jobs is like the best place to go. You could just search for voice designer on there or multimodal designer. We have a number of multimodal designer roles. And those jobs are posted. You might see them on LinkedIn or Indeed. They're across all of the different job boards. But if you are curious, the Amazon.jobs is kind of the where those things start.
That's awesome.
I do remember you, Carmen. Sorry, there was that might have been a message.
Some people
have people who've talked to Ted before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say I definitely agree with that, Ted. Like, be intentional about your search. And one bit of advice I will tell everyone, and I think Ted's, unique, and our previous specialist in GUI design is unique in the sense that one, they're really specialized. Like, Ted knows this job inside and out. Like, he knows what it means to be a voice designer. And how to recruit for that and how to support the managers. But he also really, really cares about putting the people with the right team. And I think that's something that, not every recruiter will do. And so that's something that I think, our Amazon team is really good at, is like matching you with the right place. But really, I tell people this all the time. You should be interviewing the team as much as they're interviewing you. You should be seeing how, how getting a feel for how they're going to treat you, for what the culture is like, see how happy people are. Like, really, you're going to get an idea of what it's going to be like working on that team. And I think be really intentional about, working for someone and with people that you like and can get along with. And, the excitement of the product, sometimes you don't even know what the product is, like, especially when we're these really stealthy products. So you really have to rely on other cues. And I think that's super important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ted, for being here. I'm gonna unpin you, but people know that you are here. We have just a few more minutes. I also just want to plug the people that don't know, our Women in Voice Slack does post tons of jobs and plenty of Amazon ones as well. So if you're not on that, I recommend, sometimes even hiring managers are posting them looking for diverse talent. And that's one of the questions I actually have for you from your team, Lisa, is kind of about culture. And I don't know if you want to speak to kind of Amazon culture, Amazon design. I mean, you're building your own team, right? You think about these. Do you want to share a little bit about that kind of intentional culture?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I saw, again, in having been in Amazon twice, is actually more of the focus on how happy employees are. And actually, we just added a leadership principle, which, like, we never change our leadership principles. This is a big deal, around creating a great workplace. And not just being, the best company for our customers, but also the best place to work. And I think, Amazon has, taken to heart some of the messaging, maybe some bad press in the past about not being the best place to work. And they're really, I think as a company, have really cared about how happy their employees are. And I have also noticed just way more messaging around diversity and inclusion, training around that. I'm sure Ted knows this coming from the HR direction. It's been a big push for people to also just feel comfortable as a woman minority in tech. For my team's culture, it's all about communication and transparency. And so that's the big thing I think to look for, is to feel like you have a manager that you can talk to and that will be open with you. And I think the advantage that my directs have, and hopefully they would say this too, is their manager has done this exact job before. I think it makes me really empathetic to what they're doing. You can't always work for a person who's done that exact job. You know, sometimes you work for someone who's the product person or a more general UX design person, but at least in my team, I can say, I know exactly, you know, what you're going through. And I think also having a team of peers that's really solid is helpful. The other thing I would say is look at kind of the broader community as well of the people that do what you do at the company. So Amazon has a very large number of voice designers, and we're very close. We have summits more than once a year. We have Slack channels, we socialize. It's like crazy when we have these summits. We all go out karaokeing and we spend a lot of time with each other and talking to each other just for fun. And it's a really solid community. So I think that's another thing that we have going for us.
Some karaoke, gosh, I miss getting out there in those days. I do have to say we have 4 minutes until 3 more sessions start. I'm happy staying on for a little more time because I know you all have questions for Lisa, but just so you all know about the back in Huba, the 3 sessions coming on soon. So just for people who are on here. I know I saw a question about kind of interviewing.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of career questions too,
Sure.
but I just want to let the people who are still here, you've been dropping in and out. If you have questions for Lisa, if you put them in the chat, we'd love to see what people are asking about.
There's a question from Amy Chirico, how many interviews? So our general process is 2 phone screens. And one is the technical phone screen. The next one is more around like general stuff and leadership principles, Amazon leadership principles. And then we have a full day. And Ted, the full day is
we start the day with a portfolio review for 1 hour, where you just present a few examples of projects that you've owned, and then it's 5 one-on-one interviews with members of the team, members of adjacent teams.
Yep. So it's 2 phone screens and then a 6-hour marathon, which I think we've been smart in the remote world. We've been able to sometimes split that into 2 days because it's really hard for someone to sit and talk on Zoom or on video for.
There's a reason why we did this conference as half days. It can be really
exactly. That's right.
And we keep implicitly talking about portfolios and kind of projects you've done before. How does one cultivate a good portfolio? What does a strong portfolio have?
Yeah, I think that's a huge challenge. There's probably a question I get more than anything is like, how do I create my voice portfolio? I think the right level of detail is as much as you can share without sort of violating any NDAs and things like that. And often people get stuck because they worked on something that didn't launch. And so they can't necessarily share that until it's public. But I would say, even if you can't, and you can anonymize things, the important thing is to share kind of the level of depth and complexity of your work. Also, what we look for, to be honest, is just people knowing the vocabulary and speaking the way that fluid designers speak, understanding patterns like around confirmation and what a discourse marker is and all that stuff. We'll be looking for those kind of cues. But yeah, in a portfolio, I think as much information as you can give, and if you can't give details, then share kind of the sketch the outlines of the project and give some examples of what was difficult about it, what was challenging about it, an idea of the complexity. That at least will let us know how advanced your skills are. So that would be my advice.
Well, I think it's so hard when things are under NDA, right? And you can't share. I know friends who literally made up dummy projects so they can talk about different pieces of it. Like, I'm going to make a dinosaur thing just so you understand where, how I can do
and
that.
We don't tend to do, at least at Amazon, we don't do a whiteboard for voice just because it's too hard to do a voice like design on the fly. We tend to have people talk to their portfolios, but you could certainly do a mock project and speak to that in great detail. And that would be a great illustration of your skills. And if you have launched nothing and everything's been really on the sly and covert, then maybe that's a good idea, Joan.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really, really over time. And I know people got to bounce. I got to bounce to be another moderator, but I just want to make one more, especially when people are we're talking about people who already have a portfolio, who have that direct experience of working on projects. What if you're just dipping your toe in? You're a beginner. You are starting from scratch. Where might you recommend they start or kind of begin this process?
I think if you don't have any projects to show, one thing to do would be to look to existing designs. And this is one of the things we do in our technical interview, which is actually assess and talk to an existing design. Say something that works really well on Amazon and we do for our technical assessment is timers and alarms. So you could do music, you could do any number of things, and talk about like some of the design decisions that you can tell, right? Here's where a confirmation is explicit or implicit. Here's where we ask a question, here's where we make an assumption. Those kind of analyses will at least show your understanding, and then talk about like, what interests you about voice, like why are you, as a beginner, why are you pursuing this? Any coursework you've taken, any books you've read, if you've read any of the more popular books in the space. And I think showing that and a level of commitment to it, as a beginner, I think that's really important. We've hired folks who are not brand new grads, but maybe have a year experience, very little, on my team, for sure. And so it's not all about like a long career in voice is what gets you, the job. It's really about an aptitude. And I think Rebecca Evanho gave a talk about like some career tips that
it's a very, very popular topic. The number of webinars I see about this is
yes,
if you're on the socials.
And I will say, since we're wrapping up, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out to Ted as well. If you have questions. If the question is just like, please hire me, unfortunately, I don't have any open roles, but I will send you to Ted. But I'm always open to more connections, and I see a lot of friendly faces on this.
Thank you. And that was literally my question: is how do people reach out to you? Here's Lisa's LinkedIn here. Please don't just beg her for a job. That's more Ted's domain, and how you build that. I think you, Lisa, want to probably connect about personal things, creating that community that you talk about. Ted, do you want to share any details about how people might? There's Ted's stuff.
I dropped mine in as well. Please feel free to connect, and I'm happy to chat a little bit about our process, design culture, community, or if you have questions, specific questions about teams, that kind of thing. But yeah, please connect. Happy to chat.
Beautiful. Well, I've seen people taking notes during this, so I'm very jazzed. Thank you, everyone. Can we all clap? Those on video, we can clap for Lisa. Thank you. It's been a phenomenal session. Really deeply appreciate your time and expertise, Lisa. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully to see you all in different sessions today. And feel free to reach out to Lisa and Ted. Right. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Have a great day.